because world population and demand will exceed production sometime within roughly the next 10 years. And we're going to get into that for why. But now let's go back into the warnings about September the 11th. And I didn't do a lot of this, and we have time. Osama bin Laden is of course a Saudi Arabian by birth. His family is exceptionally wealthy. They own not only major construction companies, but they are heavy investors in high technology stocks like Nortel. They have a piece of Pepsi, I think, and Coca-Cola. They're into everything. They're very wealthy. In 1976, Osama's older brother Salim bin Laden hired a man in Texas by the name of Jim Bath, who has CIA connections, to handle all the investments in the United States for the bin Laden family. Jim Bath also happens to be a personal, almost lifelong friend and former Air National Guard pilot with George W. Bush. And immediately after Jim Bath made the arrangements took over the bin Laden family's finances, Jim Bath made a $50,000 investment in George W. Bush's first company, Arbusto Energy. The connections between the Bushes and the bin Ladens become much more clear as you move forward, and we have reported this in From the Wilderness. Again, I was using stories, and you'll see this. When George Herbert Walker Bush made trips to Saudi Arabia in 1998 and 2000 to meet with the Saudi royal family and to meet with the bin Laden family, which he finally acknowledged, along with former British Prime Minister John Major, on behalf of a company called the Carlyle Group, which is the 11th largest defense contractor in the country. Carlyle Group is a privately owned corporation. That means they do not have to report their ownership or financial activities to the SEC. Yet they provide all kinds of the highest technology equipment to the U.S. Pentagon. And Carlyle, of course, has made several, probably $1 billion, and will as a result of this war. In that context, Osama bin Laden went to Afghanistan in 1979, 1980, maybe the early 80s, to fight the Russians, and he was supported by the CIA. And it's interesting to note that when the Russians invaded Afghanistan, 0%, and this is from Professor Alfred McCoy of the University of Wisconsin, who's also one of my subscribers, in a great book called The Politics of Heroin, 0% of the U.S. consumption of heroin came from Pakistan, Afghanistan before the Russian invasion. By 1985, 86, 40% of the heroin in the United States came from that region, all controlled by the Central Intelligence Agency. And Osama bin Laden came up under a guy named Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, who ran 6 heroin labs, all protected by the CIA and controlled by the agency. He has been a CIA asset for a long period of time. We'll see more about that. He is a CIA creation. Now we come to September 11th, and we're going to go into a timeline here, and I have written several stories, and I was on the radio here with Sheila Hamilton at KPAM just a few days after the attacks, and I was saying the U.S. government knew these attacks were going to take place and did not stop them. And I keep building to that evidence, but I'm going to show you a couple of things now. Not by any means all of the evidence that I have of foreknowledge, but just a couple of telling points. Israeli security issued urgent warning to CIA of large-scale terror attacks. And this is a long story saying that the Israeli Mossad knew that the attacks were going to take place. They knew that the World Trade Center were the targets. This is from the British paper The Telegraph. Two senior experts with Mossad were sent to Washington in August to alert the CIA, and so on and so forth. This is just one of probably 24 examples that I have that are absolutely specific. Now bear in mind that if what I'm showing you is known overtly through the media, how much more does our $30 billion intelligence community know? There's a recurring theme out there that maybe the Israelis did this. You hear that in some right-wing circles. Horsepucky. They didn't do it. They were warning the U.S. hand over fist, and the U.S. did not listen because it needed the attacks. And you will be convinced of that. But here's one of the most telling